You know, what would you do if you were a stupid 14-year-old scrawny white boy with a ginger afro and your friend told you, I can get us this stuff, which is just like weed, but it isn't weed, and we're going to smoke it, we're going to get high, we're going to get the munchies and the giggles, it's going to be great, and it's only going to cost us £5. We don't even have to know a weed dealer to get it because it's legal. Well, if you were me at approximately 14 years old, apparently you would have said, yeah, fuck you, mum. I'm going to take my paper round money and go into town to meet up with all the kids at school you told me to not meet up with, specifically for this reason, and I'm going to get high, and I'm going to have a great time. Little did I know, I was actually signing up for about 6 to 7 hours of complete hell, and an experience which would change my outlook on drugs for the rest of my life. I was your typical fake stoner larper teenager. I'd wake up listening to, the Weed Song by Bone Thugs and Harmony, and I'd go to sleep listening to It Was a Good Day by Ice Cube. But I'd never actually smoked weed. I don't even think I had drank alcohol properly at this point. But I would spend hours on my little Dell Inspiron laptop Googling, what does it feel like to smoke weed? Or watching Weed Simulator on YouTube, thinking that I had a pretty good idea of what to expect from this experience. My arrogance had led me to 2 p.m. on a Wednesday during the summer. I've finished school early and I've rushed to the bus stop to get into town to meet my friends to smoke this stuff, which truly I was absolutely clueless about. I get off the bus and I'm outside this smoke shop in the centre of town called Applejack's, where I'm planning on meeting up with my friends. Now, we're all maybe 14 or 15 years old here, and like alcohol in the UK, you have to be 18 or older to buy the stuff that we wanted. So we waited outside the shop, asking passers by to go in and grab us some. And eventually, we struck a deal with a homeless man that said he would get us a bag of what we wanted if we gave him some money afterwards. To which we obliged. He comes out the shop with a bag of Mary Joy in hand. We pay him off, he says, have fun, and I'm looking at the bag and I'm thinking, Mary Joy, Mary Jane, this stuff must be just like weed. This is going to be great. I'm even more confident going into this. And excitedly, we all rushed away in an alleyway off the main street. We handed our bag of Mary Joy to the only person in the group who knew how to roll and had experience with this stuff, and we began to talk about how much we were going to put in each joint. We landed on a foolproof plan. We'd split into 2 groups of 4, and we'd roll 2 spliffs. Great. My friend proceeds to roll the joints. He empties one half of the bag into one paper and the rest into the other paper. Eventually rolling 2 comically large spliffs, which I could only compare to the ones which I had seen in the Wiz Khalifa music videos, which I was watching over and over again at the time. Spliff in hand, we split into our separate groups, and my best friend lights up the joint. The second the joint is lit, the alleyway is just overcome with this putrid smell of burning plastic. It's as if you took a plastic bag, put it inside of a joint, and lit it. Everyone who's smoking it is clearly not enjoying it, but they're continuing to do it anyway. I want to take a minute to look at what we were actually smoking. Mary Joy was part of a line of legal high products, or as we affectionately called them later on, legals, which hit the UK around 2008. They were synthetic drugs made to essentially mimic or recreate the effects of more mainstream drugs like weed or cocaine, and at the time there was a great lineup of products available for unsuspecting teenagers like us to try our hand at. You had Clockwork Orange, nicknamed Clocky, Exodus Damnation, which sported some lovely artwork. I mean, as you can see, this just screams relax night in with your friends. And our product of choice, Mary Joy. Now, the reason why they were legal at the time was because they were sold and marketed as herbal incense, not for human consumption. When one product was banned, the chemist creating them would simply tweak the chemical composition to loop around the testing process and evade any bans. Meaning this stuff was just a mishmash of random psychoactive chemicals which would have no testing data behind it and varying effects depending on which brand you bought, immediately released to market. At an eye shot, some of the fun effects you can expect from your next legal high trip are agitation and irritability, confusion and concentration problems, hallucinations, delusions, psychosis, suicidal thoughts and violent behaviour, inability to move, difficulty breathing, seizures, acute kidney injury, and of course, death by either heart attack or toxicity. The product we were taking was branded as Joy Annihilation, which was primarily made up of MAM-2201 and UR-144. Both combined can be up to 40 times stronger than the top shelf weed you'd find today. So you can tell, we were in for an absolute treat of an evening. Anyway, back to it. The joint makes its way around the circle and finally reaches my hands. I've got first of the month playing through my shitty little skull candy headphones, and as I'm about to take my first hit, I noticed that the joint had turned jet black. If you smoked a spliff before, you know that sometimes you get some kind of like brown or caramel coloured resin on the paper. Nope, this stuff was asphalt black. Being an idiot, I take my first hit, and I'm instantly slapped with burning eyes, stinging sinuses and throat pain. I'm coughing my little lungs up, and despite this, decided to take like another 4 or 5 puffs before eventually trying to pass it back to my best friend. As I'm hanging the joint out towards him, I see that he's just staring at the wall. He's completely unaware of what is happening around him at this point. I tap him on the shoulder to try and get his attention, to which he suddenly turns to me, bursting out into maniac laughter. I'm thinking, great, this is the giggles I've heard so much about. And then it hits me. Within 1 minute of me smoking this stuff, my vision was reduced to a pinhole, my body was overcome with this hot, trembling sensation, and a deafening, vibrating sound began to ring through my ears, then travel through my body down from the top of my head to my feet. Naturally, I start to freak the fuck out. I've never been high before, and I've just been thrown into the 7th layer of hell. This is full on Dante's Inferno shit, fried out my mind territory, and we're only just getting started. This is not what I signed up for. You know, where's the mild euphoria and joyful glee that Custom Grow 420 was promising me? I look around and pretty much everyone is either hysterically laughing or silently freaking out as the effects started creeping up on us. The only conversation between us at that time was either, wow, this is strong, or how long is this going to last? We're not even 5 minutes in, and most of us are trying to back out. To make things even better, my friend who had the experience decided to play a little prank on everyone and shouted, "There's someone coming with a knife, everyone run." Now listen here, right? I was in full fight or flight mode, and I booked it out that alleyway as fast as my legs could carry me, which apparently wasn't very fast at all. My legs at this point felt like they had 100-pound weights attached to them, making every single step that I took feel like a full body workout. As I'm running up the alleyway, I turn around to try and catch a glimpse of the non-existent knifeman, and I end up seeing my best friend having his trousers pulled down by another member of the group, causing him to fall face first into the floor with his bum in the air. So here's where I had my Saving Private Ryan moment. I pushed through the crowd, grabbed my friend, subsequently exposing his penis to everyone in the alleyway, and began to drag him towards the street. Once we reached the street, here is where I did not have my Saving Private Ryan moment. The second I was out of that alleyway, I ran as fast as I could in a random direction to get away from whatever bullshit was apparently following us, eventually finding myself alone in the historic part of town, surrounded by tourists and street performers. It's broad daylight, and the street is full of people that are actively observing their environment, and with me being a lanky ginger kid with a giant afro, I became quite an attraction, even without the added theatrics of me falling around the streets, completely fried out my mind. It's unclear whether everyone was staring at me, or if I just felt like they were, but what was clear is that the high was building, All the feeling in my limbs was slowly being replaced with what I can only describe as the sensation of warm, vibrating water running down my arms and legs. And then around 10 minutes in, I can barely see. My entire body feels like a piece of string. I sought refuge in a local shop which was over the road, where I planned on getting a bottle of some kind of liquid to combat the cotton mouth which was quickly developing in my mouth. And through my pinpoint vision, I go into the shop, I spot the drinks refrigerator, and for some reason grab a bottle of Bundaberg ginger beer. I make my way up to the counter where the shopkeeper asks me, "How are you today, son?" Clearly in my head this must have translated to, "I'm going to kill you," or "I know where you live," as I responded to him by throwing my £20 note down in the checkout and running out the shop as fast as I possibly could. So this is where things started to get a bit hazy. The high was only intensifying at this point. The best way I can describe my vision is that although by this point I could maybe see more, my vision was massively lagging behind my brain. I had experienced such an FPS drop that it was now nearly impossible to walk in a straight line. I was running Cyberpunk on a 650 Ti, and this shit was just not working. I slowly made my way up the street, regularly stopping to either lay down on the pavement or lean up against a wall, and I eventually spot my best friend who's sitting outside of a cafe, sitting next to some tourists who were trying to enjoy their lunch, and he's speaking to them in gibberish and just making random yelping sounds. I went up to him, I grabbed him, I said, "We need to get the fuck out of here now and go home." To which he turned to me and he responded in broken English, "Isn't Paris amazing?" Now here is where a whole new era of personal crisis started. I was looking to my friend for comfort here, right? And he now has me unsure of which country we're in. I'm absolutely fried out my fucking mind. I'm looking around the streets trying to figure out whether we're in Paris or whether we're at home or we're in a different country or a different planet. He has officially just freaked me the fuck out. It is awful. After lingering outside this cafe for probably like half an hour, trying to just take in where I was, I eventually locked in and I dragged him down the street, slowly piecing together where we were. And I started to make our way out of the historic district towards the bus stop where we could head home. Along the way, thankfully, we bumped into two more of our friends who had the exact same idea. They had just said, "Look, this is too much. I'm not enjoying this. Please, can we just go home? I just want to go home and sleep this off." And after lots of stopping and starting, falling over each other and collapsing on the street, we arrive at the bus stop and we get on the first bus which came. Thankfully, it was the bus ride home. By this point, we're maybe, like 2 hours into the high, and things are only escalating. We're all too afraid to speak to each other, so we're sitting in separate corners of the bus. Me being sat in the back right-hand seat, and quite appropriately, my best friend sitting in the disabled seat at the very front of the bus. Now at this stage, the bus feels like it's moving at 100 miles per hour. People's faces are starting to look quite scary, and that once familiar vibrating feeling in my body had exchanged for this violent, pulsing feeling which was syncing up with my heartbeat. During this bus journey, a lovely old lady got on the bus and she sat next to my best friend. She was trying to talk to him because he was clearly not okay. And I watched them for the duration of the bus journey. I tried to gather myself and mind over matter this entire experience, trying my best to psyop myself into somehow enjoying it. And after a 25-minute bus journey, we finally arrive in our neighbourhood. I ring the bell of the bus. I make my way down the aisle towards my best friend, who is now just slumped down in the chair next to the old lady. I'm trying to pick him up, and suddenly he stands up straight. He looks me dead in the eyes, sheet white in the face. He gently nods his head, smiles at me, smiles at the old lady sitting next to him, and proceeds to erupt with vomit all over himself, me, and the old lady. She was wearing this woolen skirt, and the quantity of vomit that he had expelled had created this like pond of fluid between her legs. And bear in mind as well, this wasn't like, a citrus fruit salad vomit. This was 14-year-old boy diet, KFC, Big Mac vomit, all over this woman from head to toe. And quite rightfully, it resulted in a bad reaction from the rest of the passengers on the bus. Everyone's now screaming at us, telling us to get off, which sent us into even more of a panic, because we're unsure of whether what we have just witnessed was actually real. We run off the bus, and we end up posted up outside this little convenience store where we tried to get it together and figure out what was going on. My best friend asked me if I could go into the shop and get him some stuff to clean himself up, so I made my way in with a plan in mind. We need to get him some water so he can drink, so he can rinse himself off, and a towel to wipe himself off. I decided to purchase a water cooler sized bottle of water and a pack of 3 tea towels. Now, I must have been inside the shop for a long time, because when I got out, the other 2 friends were gone, and my best friend was just lying flat out on the pavement. I started feeding him water from this huge bottle, spilling shit everywhere, and I think once we were about 5 litres down, he began to complain that he was far too hot, he was burning up, and he still felt sick. So he asked for a tea towel soaked in water that he could put on his face. I grab one, I pour some water all over it, and I watched him lay back down onto the pavement, placing the towel over his face. So we sit here for maybe like 10 minutes, something like that, and he's not waking up. He's completely passed out, and I was concerned in case he was starting to overheat. So here is where I was convinced that I was doing the right thing. For some reason, to keep the towel cool, I began to gently pour more water onto the towel, which was placed over his face. I was now waterboarding my friend on the pavement next to a busy road, full of traffic, people are watching, and to be fair, he stuck it out for a good 5 minutes. He eventually sprung back up, and he managed to get up off the ground after complaining that he was so high he felt like he was drowning. From here, truthfully, I don't really know what happened. All I know is that we walked home, I eventually got inside, and I locked myself in my bedroom, hiding under the bed sheets watching SpongeBob until the high eventually ended. Somehow, I'd managed to avoid my parents throughout this entire ordeal, which at the time was the best result I could hope for. So eventually the next day comes, and some of my friends from the day before were all on TeamSpeak, which is like the old version of Discord, and we're recapping whatever had just happened. Supposedly, someone from the group we'd split off from was threatening to jump off a bridge. Another sat and had a staring competition with one of those statue street performers for hours, and another one had to be picked up in an ambulance after, quite understandably, he thought he was dying. This whole thing could have ended far worse than what it did. And it was already pretty bad. But the main thing that really fucked us all over was the lack of research. Look, I'm not going to say don't try stuff. Everyone's on their own journey, and a lot of the time, you have to figure things out for yourself. But use the resources that are now here so you put yourself in an advantageous position rather than the dumb ones we were continually putting ourselves in back in the day. Drugs are still glamorized, and I think that's always going to be an issue. Ever since the topic moved into mainstream conversation, whether that be through music, social media, film, or peer pressure, it's going to be pushed on you at some point. And if you're going to try something, look at both the good and the bad experiences. Look at the science and look at similar drugs and what their effects are. Don't go in blind. The brain is something to be explored, and it's an interesting thing to explore, but it's also an organ. You've got to take care of that shit. You only get one. Some of these guys that I was with, they went on to smoke this stuff for years, to a degenerate level. We completely lost touch with them because they were just smacked out all the time. And by the time that legal highs were banned, they had already moved on to harder stuff. I've never seen them since. And that's friends that I've lost because we didn't have the knowledge that we have now. This isn't an anti-drug PSA. Look, let's be honest. They can be fun at times. And there's nights I've had which have been an absolute blast thanks to either shoveling shit up my nose or smoking shit tons of grass. But it's only fun if you recover the next day and you don't return to a reality which you're actively trying to escape by taking drugs. We're living in the information age. You can find out pretty much everything about a substance just by taking the time to research it. The only thing you're not going to find written down is how you personally, as an individual, are going to react to these experiences. Take advantage of that. The lived experience of others, the testing kits that will tell you exactly what's in whatever you're buying from some random guy on Snapchat, and look out for yourself. You know, you only get one brain, you only get one try at life. Acknowledge the risk and act accordingly. Anyway, so that day clearly blew a door open for me, and I walked on right through it. There's nearly a decade following this where I spent dealing with my own episodes of addiction and stupid behaviours, you know, discovering what happens when your whole friendship group is built up around taking drugs, and dealing with friends that you can't pull back from drugs no matter what you try. I've got stories for it all, so if you want to hear it, just let me know, and maybe me rambling can help somebody out who's either struggling with this or is just interested in the topic. Anyway, thanks for sticking this out. Love you. See you later.